Hello everyone and welcome to my first look at the P47 Thunderbolt for DCS, which is being developed by Eagle Dynamics. In this video, I want to take a fairly broad brush overview of a number of aspects of this module, and I then hope to do a second slightly more detailed video down the line. I will not be reviewing the channel map in this video, and I'm going to be flying the P47 over the Caucasus. The reason for that is I want to focus this video on the aircraft and not on the map. Here are the contents of this video. I will place this list in the description with timestamps for each item. So you can skip to the stuff that interests you, or if you want to come back and look at something again, you won't have to watch the whole video to find it. I want to look at the exterior and the internal visuals. We're going to be looking at the model itself, what it looks like, what skins come with it, what the cockpit looks like, etc. I then want to take a look at the lighting, both interior and exterior. We're going to have a little listen to some of the sounds as they currently stand on this aircraft. And then I want to get into some handling. So we're going to look at some ground handling. We'll do a takeoff. We'll take a look at a landing. I then want to do some low altitude handling and then take it up to high altitude for some comparisons. And then we'll discuss briefly the armament that will come with this aeroplane. There are a few things I will not be discussing. One of those is engine stresses, because the engine stressing is still work in progress. I also will not be looking at spins and stalls just yet, because apparently there's still some work being done on that. And damage model damage, obviously, I will not be looking at, because the whole question of damage is still undergoing major transition. So let's get on with item 1, which is the exterior and interior visuals. Here is the P47 then, as you can see, sitting on the ground, engine off with the gear down, and the flaps are extended. This is the only skin that I have access to with this early access module. However, I'm sure that more skins will be developed in time. What I want to do now is just do a sort of virtual walk around with the mouse. So it's going to be a little bit stuttery and jerky as I pan with the mouse. So please excuse me for that. Taking a look then, we've got the prop assembly and we can see into the cylinder arrangement, the radial cylinders behind that. This has been modeled to a very high level of detail, but I guess it has to be because this is all exposed to prying eyes. What I note with this aeroplane is that the metal pieces look like thick metal pieces. They don't just look like sort of flimsy modeled cardboard, which is often the feeling I get from looking at modeled objects in computer games, not just flight sims. But that metal framing piece beneath the cylinders, it's sort of a half circle of pale metal, just looks like solid heavy metal. It's a very solid structure, this aeroplane, and it looks like it. We've got starboard wing here. You can see the gear assembly and the gear housing compartment a little bit there. It all looks very convincing. The textures are lovely. There's a very high level of detail that has gone into all the little pieces of this aeroplane. It all looks very, very convincing. Now, one of the things I noticed in this aeroplane when I was first looking around it is just left of the tailplane here on the stabilizer, where the stabilizer joins to the tailplane. There's a couple of metal sheets that mold the two surfaces together, I guess, and they're riveted on, and you can actually see that they've deliberately gone to the level of making sure those joins don't look perfect. And there's a slight raise at a couple of points where it's not perfectly flush, and there's even detritus which is kind of collected into those little gaps between the metal plates. It's been very thoughtfully and intricately put together. Moving on with the walk around then, we've got the tail arrangement and the little aerial sticking out the back behind the tail wheel. And onto the left-hand side here, more of the same. A very good looking aircraft. I've got no quibbles with this. I can't find any gaps or any major errors in the model itself. I want to spin the prop up now so we can have a look at the rotating prop, which I thought was actually very nice. So let's take a look at that before we move on. This is the aircraft with the prop spinning then. I'm going to put the brakes on here and we're just going to discuss what this looks like. The prop is spinning on idle here, and for me this looks also very convincing. A couple of the DCS modules have in the past struggled with the way the props have been modelled visually, but I think they've done a very, very fine job with the P47. In fact, I think this is the finest prop job they've done. I'm going to spin the prop up now, just to about a third of the available boost it gives me. And you can see that now it's made a very, very nice transition from that idle up to the faster spinning prop. And there was no sudden load in of an obvious new animation or anything like this. All happened very, very organically. Now we're increasing the prop further and we'll get a visual change again, a much more opaque disc here. And we're starting to see these shadowed or darker sections visually, and they appear to be rotating in an anti-clockwise direction. And then as we increase the prop spin, they come to a stop and then they start rotating in a clockwise direction. And we've all seen this in real life, that at different prop speeds, props appear to be rotating, or the arc itself appears to be rotating in different directions depending on the spin. And then as we keep going further, the prop changes again, and then we'll spin up to maximum. Tail was just about to lift off then, so I'm going to pull that back before I plant this engine in the ground. And there we are, back to the idle. We'll jump into the cockpit now. So very similar from in the cockpit, I've got the prop spinning in front of me. It is a bit flickery. So if you suffer from medical issues relating to flicking, this could be a little bit problematic for you. Put the brakes on again, and then as we spin up, very quickly we are at that nice looking, mostly opaque prop arc. This is down at about 900 RPM. Now we're going to spin it up further, and you can see the transition, very smooth and natural looking, into the anti-clockwise and then the clockwise visual effect, and then up to full. We'll bring it back to idle again, and it transitions back through those various visual states very quickly and back to idle. I'm very happy with this prop arc, and I just wish that they would do exactly this with the other Warbird modules as well. Now that we're in the cockpit, we can have a bit of a scan around. The cockpit, as you would expect from a DCS module, is very, very high quality indeed. The metal surfaces have wonderful reflectivity about them. The glass on the instruments is really good. There's no overblown baked on reflections, so thank ED for that. There is quite a lot of wear on the floor of the cockpit. That's from the flying boots scuffing the paint off. I'm not sure how many hours of flying would be required to create that level of scuffing, but it doesn't look ridiculous. The aircraft looks a little bit worn, yes. It's not straight out of the factory. All of the instruments are wonderfully done. There is a very small amount of pixelation on some of the text, and things just start getting a little blurry in places when I'm zoomed in at this field of view. But this is a very, very narrow field of view. It's very rare that I would ever spend my time this close in. And you can see they've even gone to the level of detail of putting some scratches on the screws and things which are holding the dash together. The lighting's very good. It's not super shadowed in the footwell, which I've seen in some of the other modules. It gets very bright up here and then incredibly shadowed down there to the point where you sometimes can't hardly make out the rudder pedals. But this is all looking very good, and there's a wonderful animated cabling from the rudders there back, the pedals back through to the rudder at the back of the aeroplane. Looking at the seat and behind the pilot, once again everything here is really nicely done. The metal, as I said before, looks very convincing. It just looks heavy. So this is a very, very well put together interior. This is as good / better than anything else I've seen in DCS, which means it's pretty much as good as anything you'll see anywhere, in my opinion. Bit of environmental lighting also shining off the wing there. There's good levels of glare, and we'll see more of that when we're flying later. Got some nice glare bouncing off these metal parts here. If we take a look back to the outside, you can see we've also got glare coming off the left-hand side of the cockpit. My main quibble with that is that if we go a long way away by zooming out, we don't see that glare anymore. And most of us know from real life how often we see these very bright flashes of sunlight off aircraft and off metal surfaces, particularly metal surfaces like this. But DCS doesn't seem to model that yet. I do see glare flashes off the prop arcs quite often, but not from the rest of the aircraft. So I don't think that is a criticism necessarily of the P47. It's just a thing visually with the DCS aircraft in general. Here's this aircraft's cockpit in the evening. You can see we've got the luminous instruments showing and everything else is largely unlit. There is a bit of reflection coming from the bright blue airfield lighting behind me. Got the moon over here, which is looking pretty gorgeous actually, reflecting off the aircraft body, but apart from that it's pretty dark. And this is the cockpit with the flood lighting turned on. Everything looks really nice with this flood lighting on. It's a nice coloured flood lighting, this sort of ice white colour. Everything looks unfiltered. And then we've also got some other lights which we can turn on. We have our wing position or navigation lights, and there's also a tail light back there which we can't quite see from the cockpit. However, we can see it from the external view. And if I position the camera quite far from the aeroplane, you see that they have this sort of winking tendency. It looks really impressive when you see one of these things at a little bit of range and the lights are winking like that. There is also a landing light which is housed on the left wing, and there it is just rotating to the up position or the forward position, and it's turning on, and it does a pretty good job of lighting up the space on the ground in front of the aircraft. Some of the DCS warbirds are not equipped with the landing light, so it's a good thing that the P47 does, and this is going to make life a lot easier for those dusk and dawn landings. That concludes my summary look around at the visuals, both the exterior and a brief look at the interior. This is just one of those aircraft where I find it really difficult to identify major howlers or serious visual modelling things that I think should be changed. They're just not there. Overall, it's very high quality. Now it's time for possibly my favourite part of getting a new module, and that is having a listen to it. I'm going to show you my audio options here, because the way you set up your audio options is going to vastly change what you hear and the way things sound in any game. So I've got my volume at 80%. I've got a few things turned off. Music, the helmet, which is the voices, and the GUI, those are all turned off to 0. The world I've got fairly low, and that's because I don't want too much of the environmental noises coming in, such as the birds chirping. You will hear them, but hopefully they're not too intrusive. And then I've got the in-cockpit quite loud. And I turn the switches way up to 300% because I really like hearing the clicking of the switches. I just think they all sound really nice. Sound is such a visceral thing for me, and because we can't really feel anything unless you've got force feedback, which few of us do, then sound is pretty much, apart from your eyes, the only feedback you're getting from these aircraft. So I like to have that turned up loud. We're going to have a listen to the engine to begin with, and then I'll turn the engine off and we'll have a listen to some of the switches and whatnot. So here we are at idle. And there's a very subtle change as I move my head out of the cockpit. The engine noise is a touch louder, but it's not a massive difference. And then if I lean forward and hide my head under the hood, it changes again, and it's a bit more muffled here. I can't really hear any sound reflections off the back of the airplane like I could or can in the Spitfire. There's a slightly lower toned rattle coming from back behind the pilot, and I can hear it more when my ears are like this, turned sideways, than when I can when it's like this. Yeah, there is a difference. Okay, we're just going to throttle up. So it's not super loud. I've got the canopy open. That is loud. That's the wind basically being blasted into my face from the prop. And as with other modules in DCS, the transition from no wind to wind is very smooth. It's not just a sudden sound file that plays when my head hits a certain angle. It's a nice smooth transition into the full blast, and in fact it is stereo. So I'm getting that in my left ear, left ear, left ear, and only now am I getting it in both ears. The sound design is very, very nice. I'll now close the canopy. Beautiful sound. Oh, it's wonderful, that motor whirring down. It's really gorgeous. Okay, we're going to just listen now for a little bit. Definitely less engine noise and more of the rattling. The rattling is much more obvious, the in-cockpit rattling. That's the body of the aeroplane. That's body transmitted noise as opposed to airborne transmission of noise from the engine. Let's throttle up. Once again, quite rattly. It is loud. I mean, it's loud in here. I'm actually having to raise my voice to kind of hear myself. Oh, wow. Wonderful, wonderful sounds. We're not getting the backfiring and the popping that we get from the Merlin, particularly in the Spitfire. When I bring the throttle back in the Spit, I get this cracking, popping, backfiring sound, but... Oh, yes, there was a touch there. Oh yeah. It's different. It's a totally different sound from the Spitfire. It's more of a throaty gargle than this cracking and popping from the Spit. The engine's off now, so we can have a listen to some of the instruments and the clicky cockpit stuff, which some people love to complain about and other people love to love. I'm going to just move the flap lever now and we can have a listen to that. Nice, chunky, thudding sound. Oh, that's great. Now we're going to move the fuel tank selector. It's a higher pitch sound with a click. It may be the same audio file potentially that they've just pitched up and added the click, but maybe not. That's the same sound file. The magneto switch is just a lovely click, and then we've got a multi-position metal switch here, which sounds different again. So the different switches all sound different from each other. I don't know if you'll hear that at all. That's marvelous. There's a very subtle ticking just as I turn the gyro compass adjuster. And then there's the slight delay of the momentum as the ball inside spins in its fluid, and it makes a scraping sound. Oh, it's so good. Okay, and then we've got this up here. This is the one of the gun sight adjustments. And it just occasionally makes a scraping sound as it's just moving along. It's like it's a slightly uneven metal plate, and occasionally it's just rubbing it as it makes the transition past. Really, like, there's absolutely no need for them to go to this level of detail of sound modeling. I mean, they could have just completely ignored any sound attached to this, but they haven't. And you're only going to hear this when the engine is off and you're playing with this thing at pretty much max volume. But it's there. This just shows the level of detail. That's a nice sound on the pump there, the hand pump. That's that multi-position switch. I think it's the same audio. Is that the same file? Or is there a slight pitch difference? Nah, it's the same. It's in stereo though. This one is definitely coming through the left speaker more than the right speaker, and this is reversed. So they are in stereo, these sound effects. Is that scraping sound? Oh, that's lovely. A spring sound, a plastic sort of spring-loaded fuse. Wonderful. You could sit here. Okay, I don't know if I could sit here, but I probably could, actually. I could sit here all day and just listen to all this stuff to try and find the one that's broken, that they've got wrong. And then, of course, we've got the canopy, which we listened to earlier. So I think they've done a marvellous job with the sounds as well. Certainly this cockpit sounds really good, and to appreciate it, I highly recommend turning up that instrument slider. It's well worth it. It would be remiss of me if I didn't also have a little listen to this aircraft whilst it's flying. For this section of the video, I'm not going to talk at all. I'm just going to let the airplane fly. I'm going to change the engine tone a bit. We'll open and close the canopy, stick our head out, have a listen to no airflow as well. I'm also going to turn up the volume of DCS quite loud. So it's going to be close to peaking on the video. So if you are currently listening with loud volume on your speakers, it may get a bit louder. Not sure how the birds managed to keep chirping through that. We'll take a little look at the ground handling now. The aircraft is equipped with toe brakes on top of the rudder pedals, which I'm tapping there. You can see the rudder pedal top moving forward. This is very similar to a number of aircraft and most closely matches the Mustang. I find this aircraft a touch harder to taxi than the Mustang, but significantly easier than the Spitfire, which is basically a test in athleticism and hand-eye coordination. It does not require much to overcome the aircraft's stopped inertia, which is quite nice. You can actually just apply a little bit of boost pressure and the aircraft will start moving from the go, unlike the Spitfire, for example, where you have to apply quite a lot of boost pressure to get over the initial inertia of the aircraft when it's stopped before it starts rolling. Being a heavy aircraft, it also tends to roll on for quite some way too. So with just a little bit of throttle, you can maintain a very pleasant walking pace, or fast walking pace, slow jog. And at this speed, it is very easy to manipulate the nose of the aircraft with short adjustments just by stabbing the rudder pedals, or rather stabbing the rudder pedal brakes. If you try to use the rudders, nothing happens. You do need to use the brakes, the toe brakes. Now, making sharper turns is a little bit tougher. Applying the brakes and holding them on doesn't really work, but it's a bit of a juggling act, and this is the bit that I find a bit more difficult, is making these sharper turns. So you just have to take a little bit more time than, say, the Mustang when it comes to making 90-degree turns. And in fact, the Spitfire is probably one of the few aircraft where you can quite easily rotate it through 90 degrees on the dime because you've got the dual brakes. But once you're rolling along at this, probably now a sprinting speed to be honest, then the aircraft is quite fine to handle on the ground. It doesn't do anything outrageous on you, and it behaves in a way that I think a relatively new pilot could handle quite happily. We'll set the aircraft up for a takeoff now, because taking off is actually what we're going to look at next. You can see I've had just a little bit of trouble lining the nose up on the runway. I've been taxiing around for a little time, and it might take me another 5 or 10 minutes and a couple of sessions just to get the hang of how this aircraft taxis. But it's not a real handful on the ground. We will now get this aircraft airborne. I've done a couple of takeoffs now, and I do not find this to be difficult to get airborne at all. Probably the easiest warbird to get airborne, and that's even over the Mustang, which is pretty comfortable on takeoff. The first couple of takeoffs I did in this, I didn't bother setting any takeoff trim. I just left the aircraft as it was by default, and I did not engage the tail wheel lock either. So you would expect that to be, I guess, a relatively hard work takeoff, but it's still pretty easy. Very gently pushing the throttle forward, you can get this aircraft airborne quite happily with full throttle, although you don't need to. And the only thing I found which needs to be watched a little bit is that at about the 40 to 50 mile per hour ground speed, your transition to the rudders needs to occur. If you keep using the toe brakes to steer, once you get to about that speed, you will probably put the aircraft's nose into the ground, but it certainly wants to swing around a lot if you stay on the toe brakes too long. Just before liftoff, the right wing wants to come up a little bit, so I've had to just shove in a little bit of right aileron. That's if I'm not trimming. However, I'm going to throw in a bit of right rudder trim before we roll. So let's go very gently forward on the throttle, and I'm going to apply a touch of right wheel brake just to stay straight on the runway. Okay, no more brakes now. We're fast enough to start using the rudder, and I'm just going to watch the right wing coming up, and we're up. Easy as that. Landing gear, which is not bound unfortunately at the moment, so I still have to do that manually, and the gear light is red, so the gear is up. There we go. A bit wobbly there because I wasn't watching what I was doing, But that's it. The takeoff in this aircraft is very, very comfortable indeed. I will attempt to land the P47 now. This is not going to be a textbook landing. This is not a landing tutorial. I'm simply trying to explain what it feels like to conduct the approach and land in this aeroplane. A few things I've noticed already, and that is that coming in with a low or flat approach is pretty unhelpful. You do need to make sure you've got 1500 feet or so in the downwind so that you've got a nice high angle down towards the runway, which is hopefully what I'll have here. Below about 150 miles per hour, it gets a bit sloppy. But above 150, where it, to be honest, likes to stay, then it handles quite well. I'm going to lower the gear, and I'm going to bring the flaps down, and I want to try and keep this angle down to the threshold like this. I don't really want to be any flatter than I am. If it gets flat, it gets really difficult to put this airplane on the ground. Because the nose is so damn big, you just lose sight of everything. So we're too fast at the moment at 140, and you can see that putting the nose down just causes that airspeed to go up and up and up. I'm down at less than 10 inches of manifold pressure, and this aircraft is just rocketing down here, still at 150 miles per hour with the flaps extended and the gear down. So at this point I'm going to shift my aim point down the runway. It loves to bounce. I have been bouncing this airplane every time I've been landing it, much more than I've bounced the Spitfire. So there we go. I'm now trying to fly the airplane down the runway a little bit, and a little bounce there. And even though it was such a tiny bounce, the nose really seemed to come skyward, and I had to apply a significant amount of forward stick, or at least holding stick, in order to prevent that nose from flying up. And at that point I would have just bounced too much and it would have been game over. So the approach isn't too difficult. What I find a little bit difficult, I guess, with this airplane is, one, getting that airspeed slow, and two, keeping the approach steep so that you can see the runway but still having that low airspeed so that you don't come in too fast. I think with this airplane, learning to approach at 150 is going to be pretty common, and then learning to use the runway to bring your airspeed down and to try and hold the aircraft's attitude so it doesn't bounce. I suspect that we are going to see a lot of P47s bouncing on runways, at least for the first few weeks once this aircraft is released. Going to take a look at low altitude handling now. We'll make a few turns and a few basic maneuvers down here just to see how the aircraft's handling. Obviously in the back of my mind I'm thinking about combat, and I'm thinking about performance against the other warbirds, but for the purposes of this video we won't be doing any combat. That's hopefully for a later video. I'm running here with about 50% fuel, and I'm just going to bump the RPM and the manifold pressure up to max, and just in this little close to level piece of flight at max engine settings, we should get to about 340. It seems to be where it's been settling for me, at about 340 miles per hour indicated. I am 1,000 feet above sea level here, so that's just a fraction slower than the 109 K4 when it doesn't have its MW50. It's obviously considerably slower than the 109 K4 when it does have MW50. It's slower than the Mustang and the Dora, but faster than the Spitfire and the Anton. So on the deck in level flight, it sits kind of in the middle of the pack. I'm a little bit surprised at how well this aircraft is handling, particularly in the turns, and particularly if you enter a turn at high speed. You can yank this thing around, and here we go to the point of the blackout there. I'm just going to hold it on the edge of the blackout, and I've actually climbed a bit, so not the best of turns, but it's no slouch as long as the airspeed's up. Now when the airspeed comes below 200, then it's a different problem. Now we start getting the nose oscillating about the horizon, and I just have to relax the turn a little bit, throw a fraction of left rudder in, and it stabilizes again with a slightly lower turn rate. From this point onwards, it gets increasingly difficult to handle this aeroplane. It starts buffeting at about 170. The nose then starts kicking up as I start losing lift on one of the wings, and then it becomes increasingly difficult. I need lots more left rudder to stay coordinated. I've almost got full left rudder in here, 140, and sooner or later this airplane is going to stall. It's just not turning anymore. So there's my little experiment with this airplane turning at low altitudes. The initial turn rate is very good when you have high airspeed. I'm not saying it turns like the Spitfire, but it felt comfortable in the high speed turn, just as the Spitfire feels comfortable in that turn. It didn't feel like it was going to suddenly drop out of the turn on me. We can also get reasonable loops down here. However, I have noticed that you need to relax the stick when you are at the top of the loop. I'm just going to aileron roll out so I don't crash into the ground. It's a bit like the Focke-Wulf in that respect. It does need you to just relax as you get slow at the top of the loop. I did find I was able to do some upward rolls in this thing, provided I was diving in with a bit of airspeed at about 400, 450. I could pull the aircraft into the vertical down here on the deck, do an upward roll, and then just about roll off the top. So it doesn't just fall out of the sky as soon as you start rolling in the vertical. And I've got a very, very steep climb happening here. My airspeed is disappearing, but it's still okay to handle. And it's about now that the aircraft's going to stop flying. There we go. I've stopped flying and we're just falling out of the sky. So just slow enough to get the nose over, but this aircraft is not flying really anymore. I've noticed that people often talk about aircraft in sims feeling like they are on rails, and generally it's a criticism, and it means that wherever you point the aircraft, that's where it just keeps flying. The Jug is quite famous for its stability, particularly in the dive, but it doesn't feel like it's on rails at all, and it only takes a few maneuvers to see that in action, particularly when you've got the gun sight set up here with the deflector assistance showing. So that if I stop and just try to let the nose settle, you can see it oscillates around quite a bit before it settles onto the heading that I've tried to put the aircraft on. And that's pretty common in this aircraft. It's common in all the DCS modules, but for me it just seems a little bit more pronounced with this big heavy airplane with a bit of momentum behind it. So it certainly feels like it has momentum, but you can throw it around the sky. It's no slouch, and you can give it a good bit of elevator, and it doesn't feel like it's going to flick out on you all of a sudden. It feels like a combat aeroplane down here, which it should. I might sound a little bit surprised by that, and I am to a degree, not because I think the P47 shouldn't be able to perform like that. It's just that I've flown the P47s in other places and found them to be a little bit doggish, and this doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's a nimble combat aircraft, albeit that it might be not quite as nimble as something like the Spitfire. But I can throw this airplane around, lots of backstick there, yanking over, rudder, aileron, kicking the nose over with the rudder, pushing it forward, kicking it round, and I feel like I've still got control of this airplane. It's not falling out of the sky on me, and it's not doing anything outrageous like suddenly turning into a rock or a spinning wheel. Couple of things I have noticed. The aircraft has a sort of, I think it's a Stromberg carburetor type arrangement. If you hold the aircraft in the in the inverted position for a while, there we go, the engine will starve of fuel. You can restore the fuel. I'd bring the throttle back first, just come back to a normal attitude, and then throttle back on, and you'll get your fuel back. So it's not a major life-threatening event. I wouldn't hold it in the inverted for an extended period of time though. When I first jumped in this airplane, I found that I needed to put a curve on the pitch axis. I've found that in a few DCS modules, and it seems to be something that Warthog owners, people who fly with the Warthog joystick, also have done. I'll show you the curve I've put on the pitch. This is the curve, As you can see, I've got the saturation turned down to the mid-70s and the curvature slider is on 14. That just gives me a little bit finer control in the middle and it prevents me from over-pitching the aeroplane. Not everyone needs these curves. It seems to be related in some way to hardware, and not every module needs them. I just found that when I first spawned in this aircraft and started fiddling around just to check that my controls were all working with it, that it was very, very jittery on the elevators, and now that seems nice and smooth and manageable. We'll take the airplane now up to higher altitudes and we'll see how the aircraft performs up there. I am flying along just under 27,000 feet, which is, I guess you could say, a good escort altitude for taking B-17s around the place. I've got the aircraft at a fast cruise, 2500 RPM, 40 inches of manifold pressure. I'm in a slight climb still, and I've got 225 coming up 230 miles per hour showing as indicated. So this aircraft is moving along pretty nicely. I'm now just going to give it full whack on the engine, so up to 56 inches and 2400 RPM. And we're now getting past 230 miles per hour. The aircraft is climbing at 500 feet per minute. I'm going to trim the nose down and just trim out some of the forces on the rudder as well. 240. Coming up 250 miles per hour indicated. So true airspeed is pretty decent. I'm not going to do the calculations for you in my head because I'm going to get it wrong. But this aircraft is whipping along up here, and I know it's famous for going relatively quick at altitude. Well, it seems to be able to do it. We are nearly at 250 indicated. I've still got a bit of a climb on as well, which I'm just trying to deal with here. So in a straight line at altitude, it's not bad at all. I'm now going to pull the nose up, so we're going to add some angle of attack here. I'm going to give it a good whack of nose up, and here goes the climb. 28,000 feet. It's above sea level. The altimeter is not correct. I'm reading off the info bar. I'm now down at 180 miles per hour. I've got good nose up here. I'm going to put some right rudder in just to keep it stable. I shouldn't really be looking off to the left and right like that. Now we're at 29,000, coming up on 30,000 feet now. That's 30,000 feet. We're still climbing, 160 on the clock. This is a really nice climber up at this. There's the contrail pouring out the back. Still got the nose up. And I've still got... That's a massive climb rate. The aircraft's very close to stalling, I think, soon. I'm just going to have to relax it a bit. But that was lovely. I mean, now we're way up at 31,500 feet. So this thing can fly quite quickly in a straight line. And if you get it fast before you pull the nose up, then you can make a nice climb rate. I'm going to do some turns now, so we're going to let that speed creep back over 200 miles per hour indicated. It's awfully pale up here. And there's also an interesting kind of high-pitched whistling sound, which may be the oxygen system, I'm not sure. I don't think I was hearing that down at low altitudes. Now we can make a turn. So is this aircraft going to turn, or is it going to stall and fall out of the sky? Pulling back on the stick? Yeah. Okay, there it is. That's enough. It's not the best turner, but they're all a bit rubbish up here. But if I just let the stick settle a bit and don't yank back on it, keeping coordinated. I mean, it is going about its turn. It's not really slowing down. I'm losing a bit of altitude, but that's a turn for you. If I try and stay level. Could you dogfight up here with this thing? Well, you wouldn't be a sitting duck. I think it's got enough. I'm just following my contrail around here, which is quite nice. Shows you how consistently this thing will turn. But that's quite good. We're turning now at 180 indicated. We're getting a bit sloppy. We are going around, but I think we would find turn fighting to be quite stressful. and then getting the aircraft level again. It's thin air, it's always like this, it's just a bit sloppy. We're back at 28,900 feet. So I think the aircraft is pretty quick up here. It's pretty good in a straight line, and if you can get it nice and stable in a straight line, then it will give you climb. It lets you climb, which is really nice. You can just bring the airplane up with about attitude about 20 degrees above the horizon, and it will allow you to rocket up and gain a few thousand feet pretty quickly. So high altitude handling, it's tough because it's high altitude, but I think this thing will perform up here, and I certainly think for doing flights nice and straight and level, you'll be able to get up a good bit of speed. Now, what about diving? Everybody loves to talk about the dive capabilities of this aircraft. Lots of left rudder going in here. Okay, let's get a nice... Despite the rudder going all over the place, it doesn't feel like it's getting unstable on me. Okay, there's just a bit of negative G there. 400. I'm going to arrest the dive at about 450 miles per hour. I'm just bringing the throttle right back. And am I stable? Very stable. That is pointing exactly where I want it to. I'll see if I can get it to point to the roof in the middle of that building. Bit of left. Oh yeah. Very, very stable. Pulling out of the dive. Nice and coordinated. Still stable. Just on the edge of the blackout. Power on. Power on. A little bit left rudder required as we slow down here. That's a bit too much throttle, and we're climbing away. Busting through 5,000 feet. That's above sea level, 6,000. Still haven't hit 200 miles per hour. Look at that. We can roll over for another one from lovely high altitude. This thing just went right back up. Dived down from nearly 30,000 feet. Straight down towards the building. Held it pretty much steady the whole way down. Pulling out and then straight back up to 7,000 feet. Ripping ourselves back in now from the opposite direction. I'll see if we can hit the cooling tower here. That's very stable. That is incredibly stable. Just a touch of rudder there holding that. Ducka, ducka, ducka. Splash, splash, splash all over the cooling tower. And we're back out the other side. Nice and stable. I'm kind of putting pressure on the rudders with both feet, but just a little bit more on one than the other. So it's hard work on my legs. My leg muscles are working pretty hard here. But the aircraft is lovely and stable, and rocketing back up into the sky again already. That's quite impressive, and I think that's the kind of thing people expect from the P47, that really stable, beautiful dive performance, rocketing out, staying on its target, blat the crap out of it, and then rocketing back up into the sky and away from harm in a matter of seconds. Very, very interesting airplane indeed. A very quick look at ordnance before we get towards the end of this video. Currently in this version of the P47 that I've got access to, we are only able to use bombs, which is the ANM-64. We can place one on the center line and then one on each of the wings. There are no rockets currently, nor are there external tanks available for use. I'm sure they will be added in due course. For this aircraft's guns, we do have a selection of ammunition mixes which can be used. Currently there's the combat mix, the ground attack mix, and the tracer free mix. I'll have a little look at the convergence of those weapons shortly. Here is my aircraft with the 3 bombs on board, and I'll show you how we drop those. There are 3 switches on the center console down the bottom here, and if the top row, just lift all the covers off those, and now I can effectively select them to be dropped. We've got the left and the right wing, and then we've got the belly line as well. So that's all 3 now are prepared to be dropped. All I need to do now is press my weapons release key, which I'll do, and there go the bombs. For my next party trick, I'm going to dive onto something down below me from this altitude, which is about 20,000 feet. So this is going to be a very long, steep bombing run, and I'm going to aim for those pair of bridges over there. Looks like there's a rail bridge and a road bridge basically next to each other. So let's bring the airplane into this dive. It's quite happy maneuvering up here with this steep angle down towards the ground, and we're just coming up on 300 miles per hour. I'll bring the left rudder in. Now it's pretty stable, so I'm actually quite happy pointing this where I want to point it. The rudder is super effective, obviously. I'm just going to line it up about there. I'll bring that nose down a fraction and we'll release the bombs. Now, bomb's gone. There's a little clunk sound there. I'll very gently bring the aircraft up, already blacking out, and we'll just check behind, and there is bomb smacking into the ground just next to the road bridge. So I didn't quite hit my target, but still this airplane is nicely handleable with the bombs on board, even diving down from 20,000 feet, and that's relatively accurate. It's, let's say, within a 100-yard circle of where I was aiming. I said I would briefly touch on convergence. I've got a very crude way of estimating the approximate convergence in these aircraft. I've got my aircraft here firing and it is paused, and I'm just going to move up into the plan view here, and it looks like the bullets are merging and then diverging almost exactly halfway between my aircraft and that tree, which is right on the lake edge. Using the top-down view and using the ruler here, the distance to that tree is 710 meters, and therefore half the distance is about 340 meters. So the convergence for this aircraft is at about the 300 meter range, give or take a small margin of error due to the crudeness of my measuring system. Thanks everyone for watching the first video of looking at the new P47 for DCS. I am hoping to make a second video with some dogfighting against the AI, but I've also got the channel map to look at as well. And I understand that access to these products is limited in terms of time available, so I may or may not get the time to make those additional videos. In the meantime, let me leave you with some more shots of the P47, this time flying on the new map.